Good evening. Today we're having a special budget meeting, and it's May 1st. And we will do a little roll call to my right.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Ann Horner, School Board.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Anthony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Jessica Binda, Supervisor of Facilities.
Andrew Mango, Communications Director.
Ed State School Board.
Yota Piley, School Board.
Matthew McCarthy, Tech Integration.
Tracy Oseki, School Board.
Okay. And on the phone?
Oh, yeah, good.
Nicole Khan, School Board. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm Linda Stone, and I'm chairing the meeting tonight, but we're going to pass the buck to Mr. Rapp.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Before we get started, a reminder that for the most accurate and reliable information concerning our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We advise the community to exercise caution when relying on the accuracy of social media and ask the community to verify any social media content with the district for accuracy. If you question what you are seeing, need a fact check or additional details on a matter, please reach out to the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at www.crsd.org. So, to begin with, this is a Finance Committee to discuss the budget. The agenda for tonight is we're going to discuss the 24-25 fiscal year status, that's current year fiscal status, the 25-26 budget status and budget. We're going to talk about the additional positions that administration is asking for, and go over the budget timeline for the next 2 months to get the budget wrapped up and finalized. So the first item on the agenda, and I realize this is a little hard to see, but
It's impossible to see.
it's
No.
Not when you're in PowerPoint, we can open up magnifier. I can see it.
You can see it.
What number one?
what's that? Well, it really
Yeah, printing out.
Make printouts.
All of it.
we should.
That's what I'm gonna do. Give me 1 second. We're paused, you're good. I'm gonna stream it, see.
Oh my God.
Okay, we're back online. Sorry for the delay. Mr. Rapp?
So this is a comparison of the results so far this year to last year, what we anticipate to happen for the rest of the year, and then a total both compared to budget. So you can see on this first column is the prior year-to-date numbers with our revenue, expenditures, our and so these are our, oh, okay, I get it. I'm sorry. These are the results from last year to date in the first column, not for the entire year. So you can see by this time we had collected $235 million in revenue, had $180 million in expenditures, and our surplus was at $54,859,694. For the same period this year, our revenue is $239 million, 240. Our expenditures are 184,647, which makes sense when you consider that most of our revenues are real estate taxes, which come in July, August, September for the most part. Our expenditures are measured, are more spread out throughout the year. You see the majority, we have a lot of local revenue that's come in, not as much state, we're saying we're probably gonna get another 12 million. So then if you look at the next column, it has anticipated revenues and expenditures for the last 3 months of the year. So this is through the first quarter of 2025 or the third quarter of our fiscal year. And you can see that we're anticipating an additional $12 million in local revenue, an additional $24 million in state revenue, and an additional $759,000 in federal revenue. And then you can see our expenditures, another $43 million in salaries, $26 million in benefits, contracted services at $2.8 million, purchase services at $3.2, other purchase services at $10,889,000, supplies of $2,106,000, property services and other objects and other financing uses. We're anticipating a deficit for the last 3 months of the year of $51,650,000. So if you take those two columns, the current year to date and the anticipated revenues and expenditures, this is what we're forecasting as of right now. I'm going to remind everyone that this is software. It's our first year doing this. We only have a couple of years in the system, so it's meant to predict our year end. But it could change drastically depending on how things go in the last 3 months. But it should, hopefully it's providing a reasonable thought process. So we're looking at finishing the year with $278 million in revenue, $274 million in expenditures for a surplus of $3,567,441. Comparing that to budget, our revenues are more than budget by about $474,000. Our expenditures are under budget by $5 million, predicted to be. We did have a budget deficit of $1,947,527, and so our actual budget, in comparison to budget, we did $5,514,968 better than we expected to. So that is where we are this year, where we're predicting to end this year. That prediction is lower as a result is lower than we have been for the last couple of years. But but again, we still have 3 months of activity to go through, because this is through March 31st. Since April just ended, we have not had time to get it into the system, but we will probably in the next week or so. Any questions on this slide?
Yeah, please. Could you please, Mr. Rapp, define property, because that's where the biggest variance is. And I was also curious about why benefits had that positive variance.
Property.
Under expenditures.
Yeah. I mean, property is, that's for services to the actual property. So a lot of the items that fall under facilities for care of the facilities, purchases of, maintenance equipment, not maintenance equipment, but maintenance items for, anything that's basically part of the facilities budget is what goes in there.
So Jess has been doing a very great job on her budget. And the other question I had
Well,
was.
so that's something that we'll actually talk about during the finance committee meeting, but, I'm sorry, I'm not, she's, there's equipment purchases in there that we haven't made yet this year.
Yes, Ms. Pally?
So on your forecast, it looks like there is a surplus of like $3.5 million,
Yes,
right? And in the budget, we always do that, or we had been doing, where we budget the deficit,
Yes.
right? So what was the actual surplus last year?
don't remember that off the top of my head. I think it was about 5 million, but I don't know exactly.
So if looks like we have a smaller surplus this
Yes.
year.
But
Because
again, this is
our
just a
budget is more
prediction.
tight. Yeah, of course.
In answer to that question, I do want to point out a couple things. Again, this is the prediction software, so they look at percentages and come up with an average percentage per month. The two areas where we're over budget is for contracted services, which includes things like services from the IU, professional services, meaning, instruction for students and for legal costs. But the one that's really big is that 1896, that's other purchase services. That includes transportation. I don't know, I want to watch that very carefully because I don't know that the numbers that they're predicting for transportation costs for the rest of the year are going to be what they're saying they're going to be, according to their prediction model. There's like an extremely high amount put in the June bill, and I don't know that that's going to be as high as they're predicting it to be. So there might be additional savings in there, depending on where we wind up with transportation.
Okay, thank you.
But it looks like we're within 2% of your budget,
Yes.
which is phenomenal, right? It's kind of,
A lot of people do a lot of work on this budget to get it as good as it can be, so.
yeah, that's pretty tight.
It's
Yes, Joe, Mr.
Thank you.
Hidalgo.
Thank you. I appreciate this. So looking at the surplus deficit row, so prior year, current year, we're still ahead because we haven't spent the money yet, about $50 to $55 million in that column for first two.
Yes, we haven't spent, we haven't spent, saying we still have to spend another $89 million.
Okay. So what I was saying, so the annual forecast, you're saying the software is coming out 3.55 million surplus at this point.
Yes.
What you plugged in. The one I don't understand, or maybe you can explain it for the public if they're looking at this, is the third column, the add anticipated revenues and expenses. And when I see a deficit of $51 million, of course it jumps out at you. So can you just explain what that number means?
So that's timing of revenues versus expenditures. So if you look, you can see our revenues at the top of the column during this period are only going to be 38 million because we receive most of our revenue in the first 3 months of the year, 3 or 4 months of the year, and once both our expenditures are more throughout the year, especially obviously at the school district, our biggest cost is payroll and benefits for employees. That's more evenly allocated throughout the year.
I got it. So what you're saying by anticipated, you mean from April 1st to the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay. That might say that way instead of anticipated, because that wasn't
Okay.
intuitive, but it makes sense. And so we're running, hopefully this number comes out just the way it's supposed to be. And that was the only other question I think I had right now is the property column. When we look at expenditures, is that just all the money we spend or we budget for fixing the buildings?
Anything related to facilities, so
Okay.
we've got some vehicles that are ready to be replaced. We've got some equipment related to grass, for grounds and that is ready to be replaced.
So are we
So that
gonna-
was budgeted for this year.
Are we gonna spend that money, the $3 million on the last, that's under the variance? Or do you expect not to spend $3 million that was budgeted for?
I don't think we're gonna spend $3 million, are we?
That's good money.
No, I don't think we're gonna spend all of it, but we do have a decent amount on this
We did,
week's agenda, or
We do
this
that.
tonight's agenda.
some equipment that,
But that variance is what is basically baked into the 3.5. The $3 million variance on the property expenditures is baked into 3.5 million surplus you expect to have at the end of the year.
yes, which is the danger in doing some of this because some of it will be more accurate than others. I'd also point out that I don't think we're gonna spend, we're gonna be $2 million over budget in transportation.
Well, I like it. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's the first year, so thank you.
It will get better as time goes on.
Right, every
The more
month.
data we have, more years of data.
Well, I like this. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Please.
Mr. Tate?
Is there anything interesting behind the benefits variance? Or is that a lot of factors?
Claims are down.
It's a lot of factors. We're self-funded, so we only, a lot of that cost is not really cost for the district. It's funds that move into our self-funded insurance, our healthcare insurance fund. Usually that's based on premiums that we've a lot of it's based on premiums that we've budgeted for, but also I remind you that there's a large portion of that is also the PSERS contributions that the district is required to make, and the teachers have a big salary payout at the end of the year for the summer months. So typically that fourth quarter of PSERS payments is one of the larger months.
Okay, thanks.
Are we ready to move on? Any other questions? I don't. Okay.
So to talk about the 25-26 budget details, said before that it maintains the same rates for health insurance as in 24-25. It uses the 24-25 amounts for state funding. The teacher salary and step increases are not in the payroll section of the budget due to contract negotiation. There is an allowance included in the 300 to 900 expense section, which I'm just letting you know that it's there. So we are budgeting for that, for that contract. And it does include right now, what I'm gonna show you, a 2.99% increase in real estate taxes, which also includes the 0.57% that we talked about last year and added for full day kindergarten. So that's where, so that's included in this budget. That's not what we're saying will be the final, obviously, that we recommend that as the final tax increase, but you know, that's a number that that is working for right now. We will keep in mind also, before I start going through the budget, that we have been working hard to reduce it from the deficit that we presented back in March. We've made some significant progress, but we still have more work to do, and we're working on that now. You know, based on some things, you know, obviously we can't be as accurate as we'd like to be with salary and benefits because of the contract negotiations. And we have some other things that are up in the air as far as different contracts, but you know, I talked about last month or 2 months ago that when we look at our revenues, you know, our state revenues are pretty flat, and which really is a tax decrease if you think about it, because, or a revenue decrease, because all of our expenses are going up every year. So, you know, we can only control what parts of the budget we can control. So to look at the revenues, been working really hard on revenues, got information from our EIT Keystone to give us a prediction for where we're at, where we should end up next year. We're looking at our local revenue budget being $220,995,226. Again, that does include that 2.99% tax increase. That's about $5.8 million more than last year's local revenue. State revenues, there is an additional increase of $2.1 million. Again, that's not as significant as it has been in the past. We do have some additional, do have a little bit of additional money here and there, and also depends on what our lease rental debt, which is money we get back for bond issues, and what we get reported, what we're predicting to come back in there, and also some charter school reimbursements that we get for special education students who are in charter schools. Our federal revenues, that's a decrease. We don't, and that's mostly due to the leftover ESSER funds that we spent in the 23, 24, or 24, that we spend in the 23, actually, that's not the ESSER money, that's where we're at with our revenues as far as title programs, IDEA, which are pretty much the same. We did reduce our federal medical reimbursement that we get for services that we provide, just because we're that amount that we have saved up is starting to decline. So we've removed a little bit of that so that we can continue to maintain a healthy amount in that fund, in that grant for actual expenses that we need. So our total revenue is $285,623,000, which is $7,982,270 more than last year's budgeted revenue, for an increase of 2.88% of total revenue.
Any questions on the revenues?
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, so when you're talking about the revenue, is this actual numbers?
No, this is the budget.
This budget, this is what you're proposing?
Yes.
And then this is what you proposed last year?
Yes.
At this point?
No, that's what we proposed. That's what the actual budget was last year.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. So this is just, you're just going over the last 2 years' budgets. There's nothing new here.
Well, this is what we're gonna be asking for next year, or where we're at right now with looking at this year's
So
revenue.
this is what we budgeted and this is what you're proposing now?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Moving along.
Next section, this is our expenditures for the year, for the budgets for the year. And you can see that, we've broken it up into salary for, the first couple sections of salary for administrators and confidential assistants, and salary for professional staff, salary for support staff, other salary expenses for total salary and benefits, and then non-personnel expenses for total expenses, and then that's where we are with the deficit. So for administrators and confidential assistants, we're looking at $8 million in salary, $4,426,000 in benefits, $12 million for a total of $12,495,000. That is a little bit less than last year, $158,447, a decrease of 1.25%. That includes you know, we've had some retirements. That's in a lot of the, not a lot of the, but in several positions in both areas, confidential assistants and administrators. So that's why that salary was reduced, because obviously we plan, if we compare that to what we're replacing them with, that there is a decrease in salary, which also decreases benefits because we do pay a large portion of every dollar that we give salary, in salary, we pay 34 cents of that into our PSERS fund. So that's, you know, there is a significant increase on both ends between salary and benefits. Professional staff, this is pretty close to last year, just the main difference is positions. 93 million in salary, 53 million in benefits, a total of 146 million. Again, there's no raises or steps included in this, so they're in the 300 to 900 section of the budget, which is the non-payroll and benefit expenses. That's budgeted appropriately for this year since we don't have a contract. We can't ask you to, until there is a contract, we can't ask you to ratify a budget where expenses don't exist yet. So again, that's pretty close. It's about 1.31% difference. But support staff, again, total of 35,144 expenditures between salary and benefits. Last year budget was 34 million. That's an increase of 2.8%. A lot of that's due to the contracted increases in those positions. Still at 2.8%. It's not significant. Other salary is basically the EDRPP time and other things that don't fit into the hourly or salary mechanisms for payment. That's 8.195 million. It's predicted to be a little bit less than last year, partially because there are some additional contracted items that would be included in this budget that are in the other budget. So that's about a decrease of 1.99%, but if we go to the total salary and benefits, 202 million to 202 million to 200 million, an increase of 1.27%. The biggest increase right now is non-personnel expenses. That's anything that's not in personnel. So that went from 79 million in 24-25 budget to 90 million in the 25-26 budget. Again, I'll remind you, there is some of that has to do with contract negotiations. Another large portion of that, though, however, is our transportation contract. It will increase by 4% every year. We did have to go out to bid for our janitorial service or custodial services this year. We ended up with an increase in those costs over this year. We ended up with, that's where the majority of it is, and that's where we're concentrating most of our efforts in reducing costs, looking at equipment and trying to make sure that we're in a good position with that. So that is a 14.46% increase. So total expenses increased by 5.01%. Last year, we budgeted for a deficit of 1.813 million. This year, as of right now, the total budget deficit is 7,828,287, and we are still working hard to reduce that amount. At the very least, obviously, that includes the 2.99% tax increase, but we are, looking at other ways to reduce that amount, and we'll continue to do so.
Any questions? Yes, Ms. Oseki.
I just have a question about the timing. I mean, obviously, we have this contract negotiation that we're going through that probably won't be done by the time we do the budget. So like what if we don't have it, we just go forward anyway with the budget?
Yes.
And then we continue using the previous contract?
Yes. Well, we would not.
No?
It would be status quo. So we
everything as it is.
As it is right now, but no step increases, no percentage increase.
But any increases in the contract and will be retroactive, correct? Does that happen?
That's not written in stone.
Okay. Mr. Hickey?
I'm assuming that the full-day kindergarten staff and support staff is calculated into the expenses?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just to ask, where would that be obviously under profession, just across the salaries?
Yes,
mostly?
it'd be under professional staff.
A little bit of everything.
Salary.
And also support staff.
And some support.
And
staff, yeah.
supplies, okay. That's it, thank you.
Mr. Roosevelt? You look like you're ready.
Well, I think I can wait. Just on the topic of the positions and employees, the proposed addition positions, which is the next slide, is that also factored in?
That is not factored in.
That is not factored in.
Any other questions on expenses? Okay, we're moving on.
So the next slide, these are the positions that the administration has looked at and are asking to be added. What we would like to do is, and I'll go over this on the next slide when we talk about the timeline, we need to have a proposed final budget ready for you to approve at the May meeting, so that we can have it advertised for have it available for 20 days for the public. That does not have to be the final budget. That is, we have a lot of leeway to make changes to that budget. So, but we'd like to get, we want to get you something in for that, so you have until the June meeting, at least until the June meeting. If you wanted to go beyond that, we can do that. But to go over the budget yourselves and ask any questions that you have and provide. But so these are the positions that I'd like to add to the budget for the final proposed budget for the meeting on the 15th. This is some of these I can speak to, some of these I cannot, but the plan is to have anything related to education covered at the Finance Committee meeting later on this month. Not the Finance, at the Education Committee meeting later on this month, where those where the education people can better answer any questions and explain what these explain any questions that they might have about these. So they're looking to add 2 full-time positions for literacy specialists in the middle school, one for each middle school. 4 elementary literacy specialists for various schools. You know, we definitely have a focus on literacy, trying to, you know, meet the state mandates and provide, you know, better teaching for our children. 1 additional shipper and receiver. So right now we have 1 person who floats back and forth and receives all the items that we purchase at both high schools. That person is retiring, and we need a second person because it really is, you can see that some of these things keep growing every year, the amount of things that we need to buy, the amount of that are going on, that we had 1 person who was good at, who knew both schools, but it was still not ideal. We'd like to add a second person to have 2 people, 1 person at each high school receive everything, and they receive a lot of stuff. They spend a lot of time traveling to different buildings to deliver things that are purchased, and also between our various sites where we warehouse supplies. So we're asking for that position to be, to have a second position. Council Rock, looking south, is looking for a teaching position for 0.8 FTE teaching position. That is for, actually that one, I'm not sure what that one's, I'm not completely sure, but at North they're asking for 2 teachers. That is because there are, for classes with labs that we need additional teachers there because of, for safety in the labs. Those are for lab classes, that they're looking to increase those 2 positions. And finally, in the business office, we're asking for a 0.5 position, to add a 0.5 to another position that we already have. We had our long-term payroll person retire this year. It's a big job. That person, over the years, was doing a job that really should have been a job for 2 people. And we'd like to take a 0.5 that we already have added, make that a full-time position, and have a second payroll person in there. We've had situations where that person was sick and someone took their computer home so that payroll could get done. The payroll deadlines don't stop. And if someone's sick, having 1 person just doesn't make sense for something as important as payroll. So we would like to get another full-time payroll person into that position, into that same position. And the business office would also take on some additional work from other areas related to payroll that aren't done in the business office right now.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Thank you. It looks like you guys have been doing a good job working, managing, you know, being efficient as the administration has. So, I mean, if you're asking for these, I mean, I say, you know, you have my full support, all these additions. That the educational, the education team thinks we need middle school literacy positions, which I know we do, this is the year to do it. So I'm in favor of everything you're asking for, but the numbers have to work for me another way.
Yeah.
So like I do the 2%, I always say 2% is what I've said, we have to live within our means, 2% is what it is. Obviously, capital improvement plans, those will be years when we spike it up. So, but this year I say I'm pretty hard on my 2%, but since we did a 0.757 for kindergarten last year, and this is the 2nd year, and that's the only time we'll have to compensate for that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like at 2.57, so I'd like to see that for me. And then, so when we talk about that 1 column where you have the 11 million or 13 million surplus, increase, where you're adding everything in, let me see. The non-personnel expenses, it's $11 million.
Yes.
So that's where I'm saying, you know, wherever we have to move to get to 2.75, that's what you have to work with me, you know. if you can make it work, all the other variables in there at 2.57, that's fair, it keeps us at the 2% that I think, is always a baseline. And then you can add the kindergarten in there, which I usually wouldn't add. I try to keep it 2%. I mean, look at the increases we're getting in our revenue and follow the increases we get in our revenue that we anticipate from like the federal government and stuff like that, or not federal, but state and local tax increases or revenue increases are just about 2%. Same thing with Social Security increases are about 2%. Even though it's higher this year.
Well,
That makes sense.
that's another, so when you look at our revenue, as our expenses increase, some of our revenue will increase, especially our payroll expenses, because we get a portion of our payments into PCERS and Social Security back from the state. So I talked about that for every dollar that we spend on an employee, our PCERS expense goes up 34 cents, and our Social Security and Medicare expense goes up 7.65%, but then our state revenue increases by
0.17.
half of that, yeah. So just pointing out that that some of that revenue increase is based on additional expenses, not anything that we're not really getting anything more from the state. We're getting more money based on more expenses.
Sure. You mean you're just getting some reimbursements?
Yeah. So when we look at we look at this, actually it's on the last slide.
So I'll just focus on Social Security, and if that pays out the last 5 years and what it will pay out in increases.
Yeah.
Follow that index.
So this, we have state revenue increase, but that's mostly related to our expenditures increasing as well.
Mr. Hickey, and then,
I have one question as a follow-up for Joe, but then I have a question for Dr. Sanko. You were saying, like Joe was talking about the percentage and where he'd like to be and all that, but the first words out of his mouth were, hey, I like all these additions. All these additions brings that 2.99% north of 3, correct? Like how much if we added all these 10.3 positions, where does that 2.99 go as far as the tax increase to the taxpayers? It's got to bump it north of 3.
If we were, as I said, we're still working on reducing other things that aren't.
Right, but I'm talking about as it stands right now as to what has been presented to us. If we didn't reduce
the budget anymore, it would, whatever deficit we plan on budgeting for.
Oh, okay, so it would either A, increase that $7 million deficit that we have right now that's on the budget, or B, to keep that deficit at $7 million, we'd have to bump the tax to north of 3%.
Yes.
Just to make sure I understood. My question for Dr. Sanko is concerning mostly the literary specialists, and I should probably know this information anyway, and I apologize for I don't. If we added all 4, or if we added 2 to the middle school, what does that bring that number to for each school and in total? And if we add 4 to the elementary schools, what does that bring that number to? And does it ensure that we have adequate, like I'm going to assume right now we have 1 literary specialist almost for every elementary school. Does that move that number up to 2? Or are some of these going to be shared positions amongst the 10 elementary schools?
So let's break that into kind of 2 buckets. The first is the middle school. That would be 1 per school. Currently, we do not have any literacy specialists at the middle schools. At the elementary school, we have a literacy specialist at every elementary school, but we would not, the ones that we're asking for here at the elementary level, they would not necessarily be assigned to a school like the folks are now. They would be assigned based on need.
What would that total, the total number of literary specialists then would be, go from 10 to 14?
14 just at the elementary plus
Correct.
2 at the
Okay.
middle school.
Thank you.
Any other, yes, Ms. Lee?
So what is the total cost if we add all these additional positions in terms of like money? Money,
We're looking at about 10 positions, most of them are teachers, 800,000 to $1 million, depending on, again, there's a little bit up in the air with that because of the contract, where those numbers might end up. But somewhere between 800,000 to $1 million.
and I
Including
understand that
benefits?
you can put
Including
it,
benefits.
you can put it in different places in the budget or in the deficit, but the actual number, we should think about close to $1 million, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just
Did you have a question? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah,
Mr.
just to
Hidalgo?
follow up that in a matter of a tax percent, you're talking about 0.5%.
Well,
Tax increase at 800 to $1 million.
a little more than 0.5%.
5%.
As far as the deficit is concerned, maybe you'd like me to speak on that for a minute. We budgeted a $3 million deficit 2 years or a year ago, or in the 23-24 school year. We ended up coming out better than that. The only year where I've seen where we actually lost money was in the year where there was a $6 million deficit budgeted. I would like to not be at $6 million, or I wouldn't recommend it, is what I should say. I will also tell you that we are not the only Bucks County school district in this situation. Practically every school district in Bucks County, or at least the ones that reported in the conversation that we had among the business administrators, are in this situation. There are districts that are smaller than us that had a larger deficit. There are districts that you wouldn't expect to have a deficit actually had a deficit. So it is a product of the Act 1 index. And then some of these are school districts that have been at the Act 1 index every year. I know one of them in particular has a resolution that their tax increase every year will match the Act 1 index. I'm not saying we should have that here. I'm just saying that's the fact. But we are in a position where expenses are going up by a lot. We have contractual, so our equipment and supplies are increasing. We also have contractual increases that we have to, and not just salary, but also in other services that we have to meet. So we're not getting the increases to meet those expenditure increases in our other revenue sources. So, obviously we want to do, we don't want to do anything where we are cutting programs for students. That's our most important thing.
Ms. Horner, you had a question?
The only thing I will say, because Bob just answered, basically, asked a couple of my questions, but thank you so much for putting the literacy in here and starting to focus on making sure that we are focusing on what current students are needing.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Thank you. I'm also interested, I see the new positions, proposed additional positions of 6 literary specialists between elementary and middle. And thank you for answering Mr. Hickey's questions regarding what are the totals and their distribution. What are the totals of math specialists and their distribution at elementary and middle school?
There are no math specialists at the middle school. Math specialists at the elementary school, I'll have an exact answer for you by the end of the meeting. We're short, we do not have 1 per school. I believe it's 8.4, but let me just confirm that.
And then these literary specialists, both the 6 that are being proposed as well as the existing specialists that we have, they assist both general ed or all education, is that right? Or are they focused on one category of education more than another? Or are they across the board helping all students? Special ed, general ed, you know?
Yes, but there's a caveat. The reading specialist at the elementary school, their primary focus is remediation with kids who do not qualify as a special education student. That doesn't mean they don't work with them. The students who are or do have special needs, they have other reading supports built in.
Okay.
But it is not one size fits all.
Okay. And then just reflecting on some of the recent score data, typically I'm accustomed to seeing the literary scores higher than the math scores. So with this distribution, I'm curious to understand what is the current need and demand for literary that is above math.
I wouldn't say one's above the other. I would say that with PBE mandating structured literacy and the science of reading, that we have to have a focus in math and reading. And with the work we're doing with structured literacy, it'll support that work.
Okay. The next question is a little bit more directed to you, Mr. Rapp. On slide 3, we looked at, based upon the new forecasting software that your office is using, it demonstrates, where last year we thought we would be about $2 million in the hole, and it turns out we're about 3.5 million to the good, which is a difference reflected in the last column of 5.5 million.
Yes.
Then if we flip to slide 6, under expenses, we're looking at nearly an $8 million deficit. So I just want a little bit further comment on how we resolve these two slides between either a $3.5 to $5 million surplus versus nearly an $8 million deficit.
Well, part of it is we'll always go back to that. The answer to that question will always go back to conservative budgeting. So when we're planning the budget, we budget conservatively. And we want to make sure that our budget gets all the expenses that it can, but doesn't get the revenues that are iffy, to put it bluntly. You know, there's numbers that I've heard from the state that, you know, are not in this budget, and I wouldn't put them in this budget because we don't know what those final numbers would end up being. We have to increase, not increase, but we have to look at our real estate tax revenue, and there's a factor in there that we have to estimate that is basically what will not be collected. And that's not because people aren't paying, it's mostly because people are paying early. So everyone that's taking advantage of that discount is you know, they're saving money and that's their right to do so. And it gets us that money earlier, but it does reduce the amount of real estate revenue that we get. So that's like an area where that's really up to the business office where that's calculated, what that's calculated at, and we usually calculate that to be not low, but on the lower side of where we've been over the last few years as a collection percentage. And I will tell you that number, the number of property owners taking advantage of the discount period is growing, and that number is growing every year. So those are the areas where you know, maybe next year not as many people take advantage of that or more, and we certainly want to be closer to being accurate, being under on that than over.
And that's the benefit of the conservative budgeting practice. And that resolves it for me, and I hope that that also resolves it for the community. Just to layer on another element to that 3.5 that we're at is smaller than where we were last year. I'm sorry, I'm back on slide 3 on the annual forecast. I believe that you indicated that 3.5 million
Is less than,
less than where we were last year.
yes,
I also want to indicate that the annual budget, where we thought we'd be at that 1.9 down today, is based upon the spring numbers from last year. As we're looking right now, it's 3.5 of the spring numbers this year. But what's also important is to understand where we were with the fall numbers last year. In other words,
so if you look at the first column, that is year-to-date. So that is,
well, put it more simply, perhaps this may help. For the past several years in the spring, we're projecting deficits, and we have to arrive at a budget based upon a deficit.
yes,
But then in the fall, it comes back because of conservative budgeting that we were not in a deficit, we're actually in a surplus.
yes,
Right. So that's what I meant by the spring and sort
Okay,
of the
sorry.
fall numbers, is to understand what that is. And I know that a lot of this is the projection of the conservative budgeting moving forward. You explained it wonderfully regarding taxpayers and whether they pay or whether they don't pay, whether they pay in the discount period or whether they default and have an argument with us regarding them being paid too high or something.
Yes.
So we don't have that crystal ball to figure out what that is, and that's the reason for the conservative budget.
and I would add that that's one big example of where we're off on, where conservative budgeting, where we want to be conservative.
Right.
There are a lot of other examples going down the revenue line of where we don't want to be, and likewise, looking at expenditures where we want to not say, what's the best case scenario for that.
So just to sort of wrap up, I think at our next meeting, it would be helpful if we had the end result number as well to compare to. In other words, the fall number to look at with respect to the spring number. In other words, this 1.9 that we thought we'd be at is actually 3.5 in surplus. And so looking at the same thing for last year would just be helpful, because we weren't in a deficit last year. We passed our budget based upon a deficit, but the actuality is that we were in surplus. So it would just be helpful to just look at as we're considering upcoming, unless you think that
No,
complicates.
I just want to point out, though, that we do have, to this point in time, in the first column, last year.
Okay, so this first column is supposed to be where we were last year,
At this time,
but actual numbers.
yes.
Okay, that's helpful.
So if you compare it to budget,
So current budget, the second column is where we are now.
where we are now, so that's to compare. So we're $4 million ahead in expenditures as of March 31st, 2025, compared to March 31st, 2024.
Okay. Thank you.
I had,
Ms. Holly? And then,
so the revenues, they have local, state, and federal.
Yes.
And we have investment revenue,
So investment revenue is in the local revenue.
and this is the budget that we discussed
Yes.
last time, which is about $5 million,
Yeah, I think 5.5.
5.5.
Yes, that's in consultation with Mr. Carpenter.
And the current economic forecast or current economic situation, you don't think this is going to affect that? Because the economy has changed significantly over the last 2 months.
we've discussed it and he hasn't offered any, said this
He didn't.
talk about a change in that number. We'll continue to, if something, if their prediction does change, he knows to contact me, and I'll check with him before finalize and, give you a budget in June. Make sure that we're still where he expects to be.
And can you ask him what kind of projection is that? Is that a conservative projection or a non-conservative? So maybe he can tell us one more time before we finalize the budget what they think is gonna happen. Because there's always risk in their projection.
Right. I would say that it's been conservative based on what we've done in comparison to it, but
Okay, thank you.
I will ask him.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Oseki, did you want to?
Ed, do you mind? Okay, I don't know who was first. I'm also a little uncomfortable. This is a little higher than I would like to see also. My question is about how the budget this is probably a question for Dr. Senko, so at the individual school level, how those budgets are analyzed for the next year. For example, okay, well, we have, a smaller sixth grade at, Goodnow than we did last year, so we're gonna take a position away from there. And how those teachers move around, if that's been looked at upside down, forward, backwards, inside out, to try to see if we can pull from within for some of these positions.
So the positions that is tied to the CBA, that's negotiated, but based on the recommended class size at the elementary schools, that's why we have the June 1st deadline for enrollment, and that will dictate how many sections of each particular grade level we'll need for that year. Special teachers are 5 specialists. They are, by way of the agreement, allowed to teach a maximum of 5 classes a day, a maximum 30 classes per week. So if you have a large school, for example, like Goodnow, and there are more sections in that building than 30, then we would need additional help there. And also in terms of the staffing, sometimes it comes down to seniority. If if we decrease by a section or 2 in a building, it'll come down to seniority. And then the lowest person on the seniority list would be transferred to another school.
So my question is, are we going to do we anticipate, or is it too soon to know because they're due in June, where we are going to be in terms of, are we going to be able to go down a section at any of those?
There is always some movement, but we're really too early to know that. When we we follow it all year long, and it starts to look typically like we're going to lose sections, and we get closer to that June date, and we have particularly our first grade enrollment numbers, and this year we'll see what our kindergarten enrollment numbers do, but then we get up pretty close to where we were in the previous years. In terms of budgeting, that's really done by per pupil, and Tony can tell you how we budget for each school.
So we determine an amount that, based on last year, an amount of total expenditures for the building budgets. So each school is afforded a building budget based upon their enrollment in October of the prior year. So when we look at, we'll take the October enrollment. So for this year, we look at the October 24 enrollment. We budgeted, we calculated a total budget for each building based on the number of students, with an amount per student that each school would get. And then they're given their ability to put in their detailed budget to match that number. So we don't, that's really based on enrollment in the prior year, which is, we have to start having them look at that by November. So that's why we use the October number.
Thank you.
Mr. Tate?
Please, yeah, I just wanted to say regarding the positions that the administration has proposed, at this point in the budget process, I think it's good to include them and proceed. And I know that the cabinet, Dr. Sanko, Mr. Rapp, will be working on refining the budget as it goes forward, and we'll be able to determine if these positions are indeed affordable. But at this point, I'm fully in favor of including the positions in the consideration, particularly because the vast majority are direct instructional, educational positions. Thank you.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Thanks. So, Mr. Rapp, thank you so much for doing this. Just to clarify, I want to put a little asterisk next to when we're talking about the expenses for last year, we ended up with a $1.8 million deficit.
Yes.
But what I put the asterisk there is we made a significant transfer into capital improvement,
Yes.
right? Was that $8 million?
No, it was 4 to 6 somewhere. In there.
So 4 to 6, so we had another $6 to $7 million before the transfer. We had another deficit, another surplus year. We've been having a lot of those over the years. So, and I've always said, I'd rather come in conservative, because of course the school's always going to ask for everything, because that's the right way to go. So obviously you need revenues to do the best education you could do, but sometimes, you have to, it's a negotiation, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to keep the taxes at a minimum for that stakeholder, but also provide the best education. So what my philosophy is, if just keep it still aim lower, like I set a standard for myself anyway, over the years. And if we undershoot, we can compensate the next year versus overshooting and keep overshooting, getting surplus, because then all of a sudden we do have more money that people are used to versus what we need. And that's the give and take, in my opinion, of this whole process. So let's just say, because if I looked at 1.8 million deficit for last year, I'd be like, oh, geez, we're like, but not really from a budgeting standpoint, we were ahead. We just decided to push it over into capital to address that issue.
Yes.
So that was kind of a quick way, without raising taxes, to address capital improvement needs, which is genius, but it should be, out there. There's a lot of extras. So when I look at that, I'm going to go back to the assumptions. The other place where we can narrow the gap, because I look at a $7 million deficit. Doesn't bother me because, we're under that 3% for many years, as Mr. Tate will explain better than me. We've always, budgeted deficit budgeting and being conservative as you're doing. And I like that. What I'm trying to say is, I'm still wanting to see a year where I'm wrong and we have to raise taxes the next year for that. So I want to keep it conservative, rates. And then the assumptions, as Ms. Polly said, was a $5 million revenue or for investments, or,
About
returns?
500 million.
500 million? So that's probably conservative, knowing our guys.
Yes.
And then in earned income tax, I'm guessing you're probably very conservative in those, because I believe everybody's income's going up.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, please.
That is something that, that budgeted number is given to us from Keystone. They analyze our revenue trend and what they've been seeing and what they expect. So they give us that number. So
Did you ask them if that's conservative, in the middle, or aggressive?
It's not aggressive. I would say it's conservative.
Okay. Which is rightfully, that's how we do expenditures. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, Nikki, do you have any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move into the timeline.
I do have a quick question. There was a lot of thorough questions, thank you. And I agree with Mr. Tate that including these additional positions at this point of the budget is better than not, and definitely will consider it. My question was regarding the 4 elementary literacy specialists or literacy teachers. Dr. Sanko, you had stated that it was going to be based upon need. At this time, could you speak at all about what the need would be, like what indicators from a specific school would be determined if they would get an additional, and would they be floating, let's say, from year to year, or would it be something that they would change even within the timeline of the school or academic year?
Yeah, I think the concept we've talked about based on need would be, again, the example I gave to Mr. Roosevelt a little bit earlier, literacy specialists spend time, a lot of time, intervention time with students who have difficulty and struggle in reading but do not qualify for an IEP. And so we track those students, and in the young grades, we have Title I support. So we would use this as an additional reading support. And another portion of the discussion, and we're not all the way there yet on this part of the discussion, but having some or all of those folks certified as Wilson reading, certified in Wilson reading. And they would.
All right, thank you so much.
They would float school to school.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Timeline.
So this is what we're looking at as far as the rest of the fiscal year to get our budget approved in time. We'll present the proposed final budget at the Finance Committee meeting next week. On the 15th, we'll present you with the budget book and ask you to approve the proposed final budget. That is not the final budget, that is just the proposed final budget, but you have to approve it, and then we have to have it posted, available for review for 20 days. So we're more than meeting that 20-day by having it, we'll post it on the 19th in the, on the district website and make a copy available in the Chancellor Center lobby. We do that every year. We also have to advertise in the paper that it's available, which we will do. And then I'm sure we will have, well, during that time frame between the May 19th, we'll have, sure, either at the June Finance Committee meeting or another meeting if we have to, discuss, you know, what other changes we've made to the budget during that period, and then ask you to approve a final budget at the June 20th, 2025 board meeting.
Okay, Ms. Oseki?
Will there be a public presentation of the budget this year?
I would be more than happy, I'm sure Administrator Lee would be more than happy to do that.
I know it wasn't very well attended,
It wasn't
but
very well attended, but you know, we can try again. We have board members and one person, but very grateful to that person who.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Schedule. Sure, so June 20th is a Friday. Do we plan on meeting on a Friday?
I'm sorry, did I put the wrong date? I thought it was a Thursday.
19th?
Should be the 19th, and I apologize.
That's okay. And then in between May 19th and June 19th, do you think that we'll end up scheduling something that you're saying, or is this all going to be done?
I would imagine we either do it at the Finance Committee meeting in June or have a separate meeting.
Okay, Finance Committee meeting in June.
I apologize.
thank you.
Is that going to be the 12th of June?
First Thursday.
Graduation.
Second Thursday.
So it's graduation night.
I have a question.
Ms. Polly?
We're still, he's,
So on
Oh.
this,
I'd like him to respond to it,
I'm
please.
sorry, I thought
That's okay, I'm
it was
with,
finished.
So
we have
we have
graduation.
to look at rescheduling the Finance Committee meeting if it's on graduation night.
What was the question?
Rescheduling Finance Committee graduation.
Oh, I don't have anything in June.
Are you done? Can I ask?
Are you,
Yeah, no, just, okay.
Okay. So we're gonna present the proposed final budget next Thursday, right? The education committee meeting will be at the end of the month.
Yes.
So, where we're gonna talk about why we made the positions and so on.
Get more detail.
Yes, yeah. So I think it would be good to maybe figure out whether it's maybe to have all these positions in the budget before the education committee meeting, or wait and discuss about the positions. And then, I know Ed said to put them all in. I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that we talk about that, we all agree that it would be a good idea to do that. Can go either way, but we have to understand that at the education committee meeting, if we think that we need to make a change, we have to go back and make the change.
When you changing a position in the budget's not, not difficult, but, that's why we brought it to the board. If you wanted us to add them, I think it would give you a better picture of the budget to have them in the proposed budget, in the proposed final budget.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in this case, we take it in good faith, assuming that, these are absolutely necessary without any discussion about them, which is fine.
That's, obviously there's a discussion that needs to be had about it.
Right.
Okay, are we in agreement to put that in? I mean, after education, if they decide to bump it out, then you pull the numbers out. Right?
Say that again?
With putting those additional positions in the proposed budget. If we have to pull them out after the education committee, then we will.
Right, Tony was indicating that it's relatively easy to add or subtract.
Correct.
So it could be seen as a line item for that committee, it seems like. Or just with the understanding that it can be added or subtracted.
Yes.
I do kind of like the idea of this timeline, including the finance committee meeting in June and the education committee meeting at the end of May. It doesn't have to be now, I think through email, or just for the 9 of us to understand, to put that in context, each on our own, makes sense. Either way.
Okay, we can do that.
Tracy?
Sorry. I appreciate that we're going to get more detail about the staff, the teaching positions, should I say, at the education committee meeting. I think those are the most important positions. In saying that, I'm wondering if we're going to also have an opportunity, maybe at the finance committee meeting, to get more detail about the other proposed positions, because I think all of us would be inclined to say, okay, the educators will keep, and the logistical shipper, receiver, maybe we'll cut, but I don't want to do that without having a full understanding of that
So
need.
the shipper receiver is in education, is part of the education.
But that'll be included at the education committee?
That
Okay.
position will report to the principal.
That'll be discussed at the education committee?
Yes.
And the other one?
Other one is the business office.
Payroll.
We have one person that does payroll. We have no redundancy in that department. I think we need to have redundancy. We're also, in order to save money and not just add a position, we're talking about shifting some things around so that it's not we're not adding a full position, and that we're in that process we're building in that redundancy, but we're also planning to take on more responsibility from other areas that the business department would take on. We're looking at, our payroll system gets more and more complicated with PCERS every year, and having one person at that level is just not enough anymore. I would say that, we need to make sure that our people get paid and paid correctly.
Yes.
We have a person in the one position right now that's very good, but I don't think it's fair to continue to expect from a person in that position what we've gotten in the past from the person in that position. Just in terms of making sure that our employees are paid appropriately.
One last thing.
Mr. Longo?
Yes, then we can move on. So I just misspoke. It's on the 12th of graduation night. It's actually a Finance Committee meeting, which is also going to be a very great time to tie this up if there's any loose ends. So I guess we'll just have to reschedule that week. I can't do the 16th, but I can do the 9th. So you know, on Monday, if you decide to go on the month of June.
Thank you. We'll confer with Dr. Sanko, and
You're on.
glad you caught that, Joe.
No worries, thank you.
Thank you.
So if we don't have any other comments or questions, Nikki, are you good? We'll,
Actually, Ms. Lopecki just brought it up, and since we're already on the topic, it'll be real quick. Following up on the .5 payroll business person for the business department. So it's a half position, so is that enough? So that's still, I believe, Mr. Rapp, you stated you were kind of shifting or adjusting some things.
Yes,
So that .5 gets you that a full person in payroll?
yes, that would get a full person
Okay, all right, thank you.
with some retirements and
That's it for
changes
me.
that we'll be making.
okay, then, I guess we will adjourn this meeting. Are we gonna take a little
Yes.
5-minute break and